The dust-laden winds of the Colorado Territory carried more than just the promise of rain, as Archer Novak squinted at the horizon, the setting sun casting long shadows across the trail ahead. His weathered hand reached instinctively for the Colt revolver at his hip when he heard the unmistakable sound of weeping cutting through the evening stillness. In his 15 years riding these untamed lands, he'd learned that unexpected sounds often spelled trouble. It was 1878, and the West was still wild despite the advancing railroad and the whispers of civilization creeping in from the east. Archer had spent most of his 30 years moving from one cow outfit to another, never settling, always watching the horizon. Today, that restlessness had led him down this seldom traveled road where two small figures huddled together by a fallen wagon wheel. As he approached, his palms calloused from years of rope work and gun handling, he made out two young women sisters by the look of their similar features clutching each other as if the world itself might tear them apart. The older couldn't have been more than 20, her golden hair matted with dust and tears, while the younger, perhaps 18, bore a striking resemblance but with darker locks falling across her tear-streaked face. "Evening, ladies," Archer called softly, keeping his distance so as not to frighten them further. His horse, a sturdy buckskin named Thunder, snorted and pawed at the ground. "Seems you've found yourselves in some trouble." The older sister straightened, placing herself protectively in front of the younger. "Stay back, mister," she warned, her voice trembling despite her obvious attempt at bravery. "Our pa will be back any minute." Archer dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. His tall frame cast a long shadow in the dying light, but he tried to make himself less intimidating by crouching down. "I don't reckon that's true, miss. Your wagon wheel's busted, you're both crying fit to fill a creek, and there's no sign of anybody for miles." He gestured to the broken wheel, the spokes splintered beyond repair. "I'm Archer Novak. I work cattle for the Double R Ranch about 10 miles east of here." The younger sister whispered something to the older, who hesitated before speaking again. "I'm Abigail Garrison," she finally said, her voice steadier now. "This is my sister Emma, our father." Her voice caught. "Our father died 3 days ago. Fever took him fast. We were trying to make it to Denver to our aunt's house." Archer nodded grimly. Death was a constant companion in these parts, striking without warning or mercy. "Sorry to hear that, Miss Garrison. No one should be left alone out here." He glanced at the darkening sky where storm clouds were gathering. "Night's coming and so's a storm. You ladies can't stay here." Emma, the younger sister, finally spoke up. "We don't have anywhere else to go." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried a weight of desperation that Archer recognized all too well. He stood, coming to a decision that surprised even himself. "You'll never walk alone again," he said firmly, the words coming from somewhere deep within him. "Not while I draw breath. I'll see you safely to Denver or wherever else you need to go." Abigail's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why would you help us? You don't know us." "Because out here we look after each other," Archer replied simply. "Or at least we should. My ma raised me to believe that before she passed. Now we need to make camp before this storm hits. I've got provisions, and there's a cave about a mile back that'll give us shelter." The sisters exchanged a look, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Abigail nodded. "We don't have much choice, do we? But I warn you, Mr. Novak, I'm handy with a rifle." Archer couldn't help but smile slightly. "I'd expect nothing less, Miss Garrison. Now gather what you can carry. Leave the rest, we can come back for it tomorrow if need be." As the first raindrops began to fall, Archer helped the sisters salvage what they could from their wagon. Their father's body, they told him, they'd buried by a large oak 3 days' ride back, marking the grave with a crude wooden cross. All they had left were 2 small trunks of clothing, a family Bible, and their father's pocket watch. Thunder carried their meager possessions easily, and Archer walked alongside the sisters, leading his horse back to the cave he'd mentioned. The storm broke in earnest just as they reached shelter, lightning illuminating the landscape in brief, brilliant flashes. Inside the cave, Archer set about making a small fire, careful to ensure the smoke had a path out through a natural chimney in the rock. The sisters sat close together, still wary but grateful for the warmth and protection from the elements. "You're lucky I came along when I did," Archer said as he handed them each a tin cup of hot coffee from his supplies. "This trail doesn't see much traffic these days, not since the new route opened further south." "It wasn't luck," Emma said quietly. "It was providence." Archer raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He'd seen enough of the world to know better than to dismiss another's faith. "Maybe so," he conceded. "What was your pa doing out this way, if you don't mind my asking?" Abigail sighed, her fingers tightening around her cup. "He was a teacher. We were heading to Denver because he'd been offered a position at a school there. After our mother died last winter, there was nothing keeping us in Missouri." She looked up, her blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "He was a good man. Always said education was the future of the West." "Sounds like he was right," Archer said. "I never had much schooling myself, learned to read and write from my ma, but that's about it." "Pa always said it's never too late to learn," Emma offered, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Archer nodded, finding himself strangely drawn to Abigail's quiet strength and Emma's gentle spirit. He'd been alone for so long, moving from place to place, that the simple act of conversation with these two young women felt almost foreign to him. "Get some rest," he advised. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do next. Denver's still a good 4 days' ride from here, maybe more depending on the weather." As the sisters settled down, using their shawls as makeshift blankets, Archer kept watch by the fire. The storm raged outside, but inside the cave, a fragile peace had descended. For the first time in years, Archer felt a sense of purpose beyond the day-to-day work of a cowhand. These women needed him, and something inside him responded to that need in a way he hadn't expected. The night passed slowly, with Archer catching only brief moments of sleep between keeping the fire fed and checking on the sisters. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean world glittering with raindrops. Abigail was the first to wake, sitting up and tucking a strand of golden hair behind her ear. "You stayed awake all night," she observed, her voice soft so as not to wake Emma. Archer shrugged. "Force of habit, been on my own a long time." "Thank you," Abigail said, meeting his eyes directly for the first time, "for helping us. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "No need for thanks," Archer replied, feeling oddly uncomfortable under her steady gaze. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said firmly, "not anyone. The last man who passed by our broken wagon yesterday didn't even slow down." Archer frowned at this information. "Did you see who it was?" Abigail shook her head. "Just a man on a horse, wore a black hat with a silver band, looked right at us and kept riding." The description was vague, but it set Archer on edge nonetheless. The territory had its share of outlaws and desperate men, and the thought of such a person knowing about two vulnerable women alone on the trail didn't sit well with him. Emma stirred and woke, her eyes widening momentarily in confusion before she remembered where she was. "Morning," she murmured, sitting up and smoothing her skirts. "We should get moving," Archer said, already packing up his meager camp. "There's a trading post about 15 miles from here. We can get supplies and maybe find you ladies a proper wagon." "We don't have much money," Abigail admitted. "Just what Pa had saved for our new start in Denver." Archer waved away her concern. "Don't worry about that now, let's just get there first." They set out as the sun climbed higher, Archer walking beside Thunder while the sisters took turns riding. The trail was muddy from the rain, slowing their progress, but by mid-afternoon, the trading post came into view, a collection of rough-hewn buildings surrounded by a split-rail fence. As they approached, Archer noticed a group of men gathered outside the main building, their horses tied to the hitching post. Something about their posture put him on alert. "Stay behind me," he told the sisters quietly, "and be ready to take Thunder and ride if I tell you to." Abigail frowned. "What's wrong?" "Probably nothing," Archer replied, though his hand drifted to his gun belt. "Just being cautious." The men turned as Archer and the sisters approached, and one of them, a tall, lean figure with a pockmarked face, stepped forward. "Well, look what we have here," he drawled. "Archer Novak, ain't it? Heard you was working for the Double R these days." Archer recognized the man as Joel Simmons, a small-time rustler and troublemaker known throughout the territory. "Simmons," he acknowledged curtly. What brings you this far north?" Simmons grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Just passing through, same as you, I reckon." His gaze slid past Archer to the sisters. "Got yourself some company, I see." "These ladies are under my protection," Archer said, his voice hard. "They're heading to Denver to meet family." "Is that so?" Simmons looked the sisters up and down, his expression calculating. "Pretty things, ain't they, boys?" The men behind him chuckled, and Archer felt his muscles tense. "We're just here for supplies," he said evenly. "Don't want any trouble. Trouble." Simmons raised his hands in mock surrender. "Who's talking about trouble? Just making conversation." He stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy. "Trading post is open, don't let us keep you." Archer didn't move for a moment, assessing the situation. 5 men, all armed, all with the look of men who lived outside the law. He could take maybe 2 in a fair fight, but 5, and with the sisters to protect, the odds weren't good. "Much obliged," he finally said, leading Thunder and the sisters past the group and toward the trading post. He could feel the men's eyes on them all the way to the door. Inside, the trading post was cool and dim, shelves stocked with everything from canned goods to ammunition. The proprietor, a grizzled old man with one eye, looked up from his ledger as they entered. "Afternoon," he greeted them. "What can I do for you folks?" "Need supplies for 3, Archer said, keeping his voice low. "And information about those men outside." The proprietor's single eye narrowed. "Simmons and his bunch been here 3 days. Claim they're waiting for a friend, but I think they're lying low after some trouble up north. Heard whispers about a stagecoach robbery, but nothing confirmed." Archer nodded grimly. "Any chance of getting a wagon here? These ladies need to get to Denver." The old man scratched his beard. "Might have an old buckboard out back. Not pretty, but it'll get you there. $20, and that's a friend's price." Archer glanced at Abigail, who was holding Emma's hand tightly, her face pale but determined. "We have 15, she said quietly, pulling a small pouch from her pocket. "I can make up the difference," Archer assured her, turning back to the proprietor. "We'll take it, and whatever supplies we can get for another $10. While the old man gathered their supplies, Archer kept watch through the window. Simmons and his men had moved to the porch of the building across the way, the local saloon, from the looks of it, but they were still watching the trading post. "Mr. Bryant," Archer addressed the proprietor by the name he'd seen on a sign behind the counter. "Is there a back way out of here?" Bryant nodded. "Through the storeroom, leads out to where I keep the wagons and such, trying to avoid Simmons." "Rather not have a confrontation if I can help it," Archer admitted. "Smart man," Bryant said approvingly. "I'll have my boy hitch up the buckboard for you. You can load your supplies and be on your way without those buzzards being any the wiser." Archer thanked him, and within half an hour they were ready to depart. The buckboard was indeed old, its wood weathered by years of sun and rain, but the wheels were sound and the harness well maintained. Bryant's son, a lanky youth of about 16, had hitched Thunder to it and loaded their supplies. "Take the South Trail out," Bryant advised as they prepared to leave. "It's longer to Denver by about a day, but less traveled. Simmons and his bunch tend to stick to the main roads where there's more potential for profit." Archer nodded his understanding. "Much obliged for your help." "Don't mention it," Bryant replied. "Just do an old man a favor and see these young ladies safely to Denver. Too many good folks don't make it in these parts." With a final word of thanks, Archer helped the sisters onto the buckboard and took the reins. They slipped out the back way as Bryant had suggested, following a narrow trail that eventually connected with the south road the old man had mentioned. It wasn't until they were several miles from the trading post that Archer felt the tension in his shoulders begin to ease. Beside him on the buckboard seat, Abigail seemed to sense his relief. "Those men," she said quietly, "they were dangerous, weren't they?" Archer nodded, seeing no point in lying. "Simmons is known for rustling cattle, but there've been rumors of worse, stagecoach robberies, as Bryant mentioned, maybe more, and they would have." Emma, sitting behind them in the wagon bed, couldn't finish the thought. "They didn't," Archer said firmly, "and they won't. I meant what I said yesterday, you'll never walk alone again, not while I'm around." Abigail studied his profile, her blue eyes thoughtful. "Why are you doing this, Mr. Novak? Truly, you're risking your life for 2 strangers." Archer was silent for a long moment, considering the question. Why indeed? He'd been drifting for so long, avoiding attachments, keeping to himself. Yet something about these sisters, their courage in the face of loss, their determination to forge ahead had struck a chord within him. Everyone deserves someone to stand beside them, he finally said. Especially out here, the West can be beautiful, but it's harsh, unforgiving. No one should face it alone. Abigail's expression softened, and she reached out impulsively to touch his arm. Thank you, she said simply. Archer nodded, uncomfortable with her gratitude but warmed by it nonetheless. We should make camp soon, he said, changing the subject. There's a creek about a mile ahead that would be a good spot. As they continued their journey, Archer found himself increasingly aware of Abigail's presence beside him. She sat straight-backed and vigilant, her golden hair catching the late afternoon sunlight. Despite her obvious fatigue and grief, there was a resilience about her that commanded respect. Emma, by contrast, seemed more fragile, her soft voice occasionally drifting forward as she commented on the beauty of the landscape or shared memories of their father. Yet beneath her gentleness, Archer sensed the same core of strength that her sister possessed. They made camp by the creek as planned, and Archer set about building a fire while the sisters organized their supplies. Working together, they prepared a simple meal of beans, jerky, and coffee, eating in companionable silence as twilight descended. After dinner, Emma took out their family Bible and read aloud by firelight, her voice gaining strength as she recited familiar passages. Archer, who hadn't heard scripture since his mother's passing years ago, found himself oddly comforted by the words. When Emma finally closed the book, Abigail turned to Archer. Our father always said that sharing stories helps to make strangers into friends, she said. Would you tell us something about yourself, Mr. Novak? Archer, unused to talking about his past, shifted uncomfortably. Not much to tell, he said. Born in Pennsylvania, came west with my parents when I was 10. Pa worked the silver mines until a cave-in took him. Ma and I kept going, ended up in Colorado territory. She taught school for a while in a small settlement, but consumption claimed her 5 years back. Been on my own since, working cattle mostly. I'm sorry about your parents, Abigail said softly. Archer shrugged. It was a long time ago, not your mother, Emma pointed out gently. 5 years isn't so long, no, Archer admitted. I suppose it isn't. Did you never think of settling down? Abigail asked. Finding a place of your own, perhaps a wife, the question caught Archer off guard. Never stayed in one place long enough, he said after a moment. And most women have better sense than to hitch themselves to a saddled tramp with nothing to his name but a horse and a gun. I think you underestimate yourself, Abigail said, her eyes reflecting the firelight, and women. Something in her gaze made Archer's heart beat faster, and he looked away, uncomfortable with the unfamiliar feeling. We should get some rest, he said. Got a long ride ahead tomorrow. As they settled down for the night, Archer taking first watch as he had the night before, he found his thoughts returning to Abigail's words. He'd never given much thought to a permanent home or a family of his own. The West was changing, though. The wild, open spaces were gradually being tamed, fenced in, civilized. Perhaps there was a place for him in this new world after all. The thought was both appealing and terrifying, and he pushed it aside to focus on the task at hand, getting the Garrison sisters safely to Denver. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and they set out early, making good progress along the South Trail. The landscape changed gradually, the flat plains giving way to rolling hills dotted with pines as they approached the foothills of the Rockies. Around midday, as they stopped to rest the horse and eat a cold lunch, Archer noticed a plume of dust in the distance behind them. He frowned, shading his eyes against the sun. What is it? Abigail asked, following his gaze. Riders, Archer said grimly, 4, maybe 5 of them moving fast. Simmons? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Could be, Archer admitted, or could be anyone, but we'd best not take chances. He quickly began repacking their supplies. We'll try to outrun them. The trail ahead enters more wooded country, easier to lose them there if needed. They set off again, Archer pushing Thunder to a faster pace than before. The buckboard rattled and creaked, but held together as they sped along the trail. Archer kept glancing back, noting with growing concern that the dust cloud was gaining on them. "There's a fork in the trail about 2 miles ahead," he told the sisters, his voice tight. "One branch goes toward Denver, the other toward a mining settlement called Silver Creek. We'll take the Silver Creek road might throw them off." But as they approached the fork, Archer's heart sank. The riders behind them were close enough now to make out clearly Simmons and his gang, their horses lathered with sweat from the hard ride. "They're gaining on us," Abigail said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Archer made a split-second decision. "Take the reins," he told her, passing them over. "Keep heading towards Silver Creek. Don't stop for anything." "What are you going to do?" she demanded, even as she gripped the reins. Archer checked his revolver, ensuring it was fully loaded. "Going to slow them down," he said grimly. "Give you a chance to get away?" "No," both sisters protested simultaneously. "You can't face them alone," Abigail insisted. "There are too many." "I don't plan to fight them if I can help it," Archer assured her. "Just delay them, trust me." Before she could argue further, Archer swung himself off the moving wagon, landing hard but keeping his feet. "Go!" he shouted, and after a moment's hesitation, Abigail snapped the reins, urging Thunder forward. Archer positioned himself in the middle of the trail, his hand resting on his gun. He didn't draw it, not yet, but stood ready as Simmons and his men approached. They slowed as they spotted him, spreading out slightly in a practiced formation that told Archer these men had faced confrontations before. "Novak," Simmons called as they came to a halt about 20 yards away. "Where are your pretty companions?" "Gone," Archer replied evenly. "And I suggest you follow their example." Simmons laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet afternoon. "Now, why would we do that when we've come all this way to make your acquaintance properly?" "What do you want, Simmons?" Archer demanded, cutting through the pretense. The outlaw's smile faded. "Information, for starters. Word is a stagecoach was robbed north of here 3 days back. Army payroll. Driver killed. And some folks are saying a man matching your description was seen in the area." Archer's surprise must have shown on his face because Simmons chuckled. "Not what you were expecting, eh? Though I was after the ladies." "I had nothing to do with any stagecoach robbery," Archer said firmly. "I was working cattle for the Double R until yesterday when I found those women stranded on the trail." "Convenient story," one of Simmons' men remarked, "but why should we believe you?" "Because it's the truth," Archer replied, "and because I'm not fool enough to rob an army payroll." Simmons studied him for a long moment. "Maybe," he finally conceded, "or maybe you're just smart enough to play innocent. Either way, we aim to find out." He gestured to his men. "Search him." 2 of the outlaws dismounted and approached cautiously, hands hovering near their weapons. Archer knew he could draw and likely take one or both before they could react, but the others would cut him down immediately. And then where would the Garrison sisters be? So he stood still, allowing the men to search him. They found his money, the remainder after purchasing the buckboard and supplies, and his pocket watch, but nothing that would connect him to a stagecoach robbery. "Nothing, boss," one of the men reported. "Just a few dollars and a watch." Simmons frowned. "Where's the rest of your gear?" "On my horse," Archer replied. "With the women." "The women you claim you just met yesterday," Simmons said skeptically, "yet you're risking your life to help them." Archer shrugged. "Call it a character flaw." Simmons laughed again, but there was no humor in it. "You know what I think, Novak. I think you're hiding something, maybe not the payroll, but something." He leaned forward in his saddle. "And I aim to find out what it is. Boys, tie him up. We're going after those women." Archer tensed, preparing to draw his weapon despite the odds, when the sound of hoofbeats from the direction of the fork caught everyone's attention. A group of riders appeared, 6 men wearing the unmistakable blue uniforms of the U.S. Cavalry. Simmons cursed under his breath. "This isn't over, Novak," he growled, wheeling his horse around. "Let's go, boys." The outlaws spurred their horses, galloping away as the cavalry patrol approached. Archer remained where he was, relieved but concerned about what had just transpired. Why had Simmons connected him to a stagecoach robbery? And more importantly, where were Abigail and Emma? The cavalry patrol slowed as they reached him, the leader a lieutenant by his insignia raising a hand in greeting. "Afternoon," he called. "Lieutenant Daniel Taylor, U.S. Cavalry." Everything all right here, Archer Novak, he introduced himself. And yes, thanks to your timely arrival, those men were giving me trouble. Recognized one of them, the lieutenant said grimly. Joel Simmons, wanted for questioning about a stagecoach robbery 3 days ago, you know him. Only by reputation, Archer replied honestly. And it seems he's trying to pin that robbery on me for some reason. Lieutenant Taylor studied him thoughtfully. Where you headed, Mr. Novak? Silver Creek, Archer said, gesturing toward the fork in the trail, escorting 2 young women there. Their father passed recently, and they're on their way to relatives in Denver, but we decided to stop in Silver Creek first. He hesitated, then added, they went ahead when Simmons and his men showed up. I stayed behind to delay them. The lieutenant nodded, brave if foolhardy. We'll escort you to Silver Creek, make sure those ladies are safe. Then we might have some more questions about Simmons. Archer thanked him, grateful for the protection but anxious to find Abigail and Emma. They set off toward Silver Creek, Archer riding double with one of the cavalrymen. As they traveled, Lieutenant Taylor explained that they'd been tracking Simmons and his gang since the stagecoach robbery. $4,000 in Army payroll stolen, Taylor said. Driver killed, guard wounded, bad business. Simmons has been a troublemaker for years, but this is the first time he's escalated to murder. Why would he think I was involved? Archer wondered aloud. Taylor shrugged. Maybe he's looking to shift blame, or maybe someone matching your description was seen in the area. Hard to say. They reached Silver Creek by late afternoon, a bustling mining town nestled in a valley between 2 pine-covered ridges. The main street was lined with the usual establishments: saloon, general store, a Sayers office, hotel, and crowded with miners, merchants, and the occasional respectable citizen. Archer scanned the street anxiously, looking for any sign of the buckboard or the sisters. They finally spotted Thunder tied outside the hotel, the buckboard nowhere in sight. Looks like your friends made it, Taylor observed. They dismounted in front of the hotel, and Archer immediately went inside, the lieutenant following behind. The hotel lobby was small but clean, with a polished wooden counter and a staircase leading to the upper floor. A portly man with an impressive mustache stood behind the counter, eyeing them curiously. I'm looking for 2 young women who would have arrived earlier today, Archer said without preamble. Sisters, 1 blonde, 1 brunette, the man nodded. The Garrison ladies. Yes, they checked in about 2 hours ago, room 3 upstairs. He frowned slightly. They seemed quite distressed, said they were waiting for someone. Relief flooded through Archer. That would be me, thank you. He took the stairs 2 at a time, Taylor following at a more measured pace. At room 3, Archer knocked firmly. Abigail, Emma, it's Archer. There was a moment of silence, then the sound of a bolt being drawn back. The door opened just enough for Abigail to peer through, her face lighting up with relief when she saw him. Archer, thank God. She threw the door open wider and, to his surprise, flung her arms around him in a tight embrace. We thought they might have killed you. Archer, momentarily stunned by the unexpected contact, awkwardly patted her back. Takes more than Simmons and his bunch to do that, he said, trying to keep his tone light despite the warmth spreading through him at her touch. Emma appeared behind her sister, her eyes red from crying but a smile breaking across her face. Mr. Novak, we were so worried. Archer gently disentangled himself from Abigail, suddenly aware of Lieutenant Taylor standing a few feet away, watching with undisguised interest. Ladies, this is Lieutenant Taylor of the U.S. Cavalry. He and his men drove off Simmons and escorted me here. The lieutenant removed his hat and nodded politely. Miss Garrison, Miss Emma, glad to see you're safe. The lieutenant says Simmons is wanted for a stagecoach robbery, Archer explained. That's why they were after us, or me specifically. They think I had something to do with it. Abigail's eyes widened. That's absurd. You were with the Double R until yesterday. You seem very certain of that, Miss Garrison, Taylor observed. For someone who claims to have only met Mr. Novak yesterday. Abigail flushed slightly. We've talked quite a bit during our journey. He told us about his work at the ranch. Taylor nodded, seeming satisfied with the explanation. Well, I'll need statements from all of you. And Mr. Novak, I'd appreciate if you'd remain in Silver Creek for a few days while we sort this out. I don't think you're involved with the robbery, but your testimony against Simmons could be valuable. After the lieutenant left, promising to return in the morning for their statements, Archer turned to the sisters. "Are you both all right? I was worried when I couldn't find the buckboard." "We sold it," Abigail explained, "or rather traded it for 2 rooms here at the hotel and some new supplies. The livery stable owner gave us a fair deal considering, said the buckboard was worth more than the room rate for a few days." Archer nodded approvingly. "Smart thinking." "We got you a room too," Emma added. "Next door to ours. We hoped you'd come." The simple statement touched Archer deeply. They had believed in him, expected him to find his way to them despite the danger. It was a kind of faith he wasn't accustomed to inspiring. "Thank you," he said quietly, "both of you for waiting." Abigail smiled, and Archer was struck again by her beauty, not just her golden hair and blue eyes, but the strength and intelligence that radiated from her. "You said we'd never walk alone again," she reminded him. "We believed you." That evening, they dined together in the hotel's small restaurant, exchanging the details of their respective adventures since separating at the fork in the road. The sisters had arrived in Silver Creek without incident, though they'd been terrified for Archer's safety. They'd made inquiries about a stagecoach to Denver, but had decided to wait for Archer before making further plans. "We should be able to leave in a few days, once the lieutenant is satisfied with our statements," Archer told them. "There's a stagecoach to Denver twice a week, I'm told." Abigail nodded, but she seemed distracted. "Archer," she said, using his first name for the first time, "what will you do after you get us to Denver? Go back to the Double R?" The question caught him off guard. He hadn't thought that far ahead. "I suppose so," he said slowly. "Though I left rather abruptly, not sure if my job will still be waiting." You could come with us to our aunt's house," Emma suggested hesitantly. "Just until you decide what to do next." Archer was touched by the offer but shook his head. "That's kind of you, but I wouldn't want to impose. Besides, your aunt doesn't know me from Adam. Might not appreciate a strange cowboy showing up on her doorstep." "You're not strange to us," Abigail said firmly, "and Aunt Martha will understand once we explain everything you've done for us." "Let's get to Denver first," Archer suggested, uncomfortable with planning so far ahead. "Then we can decide." After dinner, they retired to their rooms, Archer checking the sisters' window and door locks before going to his own room. Despite his exhaustion, sleep eluded him. His mind kept returning to Abigail, the feel of her arms around him when he'd arrived, the way her eyes seemed to see right through his carefully maintained reserve. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at him that way, as if he mattered. The next morning, Lieutenant Taylor returned as promised to take their statements. He interviewed each of them separately, asking detailed questions about their encounters with Simmons and his gang. When he was finished, he seemed satisfied. "I believe your story checks out, Mr. Novak," he told Archer, "and it's consistent with what we know about the robbery. The stage was hit around noon 3 days ago, and according to the foreman at the Double R, whom we've contacted by telegraph, you were working cattle with 3 other hands that day from sunrise to sunset." Archer nodded, relieved. "So why did Simmons try to pin it on me?" "Desperation, most likely," Taylor replied. "He knows we're closing in, trying to create confusion, throw us off his trail." He adjusted his hat. "We'll be heading out to continue the search. You folks should be safe enough here in town, but I'd still advise caution until Simmons is apprehended." After the lieutenant left, Archer rejoined the sisters who were waiting in the hotel lobby. "We're in the clear," he told them. "Taylor confirmed I was at the Double R when the robbery took place." "Of course you were," Abigail said indignantly. "Anyone who knows you would never believe you capable of such a thing." Archer smiled at her loyalty. "You've known me 3 days, Abigail, hardly enough time to judge a man's character." "Sometimes you just know," she replied softly, holding his gaze. Emma cleared her throat delicately. "I was thinking of visiting the general store," she said. "We need a few things for the journey to Denver. Would either of you like to join me?" "I'll come with you," Archer offered immediately, conscious of the lieutenant's warning about caution. "Better not to wander around alone until Simmons is caught." "Actually," Abigail interjected, "I was hoping you might accompany me to the telegraph office. I should send word to Aunt Martha that we're delayed but safe." Archer hesitated, torn between the 2 sisters. "It's not safe for either of you to go alone. The general store is just across the street," Emma pointed out. "I'll be perfectly fine for half an hour, and you can see the door from the telegraph office window." After some debate, Archer reluctantly agreed to the plan. He escorted Abigail to the telegraph office, a small building at the end of the main street, while keeping a watchful eye on the general store where Emma disappeared inside. As Abigail composed her message to her aunt, Archer stood by the window, scanning the street for any sign of trouble. Silver Creek was busy with the usual mid-morning activities, miners heading to or from their shifts, shopkeepers sweeping porches, a wagon delivering goods to the general store. "You're very protective," Abigail observed, coming to stand beside him after sending her telegram. Archer shrugged. "Force of habit. The West isn't always kind to those who aren't vigilant." "Is that why you've never settled down?" she asked. "Always watching for danger around every corner." "Partly," he admitted, "and partly because I never found a reason to stay in one place. Always felt like I was looking for something, though I couldn't tell you what." Abigail studied him thoughtfully. "Perhaps you'll know it when you find it." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. For a moment, Archer allowed himself to imagine what it might be like to stop running, to build something permanent with someone like Abigail at his side. The moment was broken by a commotion outside. Shouts echoed down the street, and Archer's attention snapped back to the present. His heart froze when he saw 3 riders galloping into town. Simmons and 2 of his men. "Stay here," he ordered Abigail, already moving toward the door. "Lock it behind me." "Archer, no," she protested, grabbing his arm. "There are 3 of them." "Emma's still in the general store," he reminded her grimly. "I have to get to her before they do." Understanding dawned in Abigail's eyes, and she released him. "Be careful," she whispered. Archer nodded and stepped outside, drawing his revolver as he moved into the street. Simmons and his men had reined in their horses in front of the saloon, scanning the area. They hadn't spotted him yet. Moving quickly but calmly, Archer made his way toward the general store, keeping to the shadows of the building fronts where possible. He was halfway there when Simmons turned and saw him. "Novak," the outlaw shouted, drawing his own weapon. "Should have known you'd be here." Archer dove for cover behind a water trough as Simmons fired, the bullet splintering the wood near his head. The street erupted into chaos as pedestrians scattered, seeking shelter from the gunfire. From his position, Archer could see the general store, its door now firmly closed. Good, at least Emma was inside and hopefully safe. But he was pinned down, with Simmons and his men using their horses as cover while they took potshots at his hiding place. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for the intervention of Silver Creek Sheriff, who emerged from his office down the street with a shotgun in hand. "Drop your weapons," he bellowed. "All of you." Simmons, seeing the new threat, made a split-second decision. He wheeled his horse around and charged directly at Archer's position, firing as he came. Archer waited until the last possible moment, then rolled out from behind the trough, coming up on one knee with his revolver aimed squarely at the charging outlaw. He fired once, twice. The first shot missed, but the second caught Simmons in the shoulder, knocking him from his saddle. The outlaw hit the ground hard, his gun skittering away across the dirt. Simmons' men, seeing their leader fall, turned their horses to flee, only to find themselves facing the sheriff and several armed townspeople who had emerged to help. Outmanned and outgunned, they surrendered. Archer approached Simmons cautiously, keeping his revolver trained on the wounded man. "It's over, Simmons," he said quietly. "The cavalry knows you robbed that stagecoach. They'll be back soon." Simmons glared up at him, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "You're a dead man, Novak," he snarled. "If not by my hand, then by someone else's. Men like you don't last long out here." "Maybe," Archer conceded, "but I'll take my chances." The sheriff arrived, binding Simmons' wound before securing him in handcuffs. "Been wanting to get my hands on you for a while, Simmons," he said grimly. "You and your boys are going to jail until the cavalry returns." As the outlaws were led away, Archer holstered his weapon and looked toward the general store. The door opened, and Emma emerged, pale but unharmed. And behind her came Abigail, who had apparently slipped out of the telegraph office during the confusion to join her sister. The Garrison sisters ran to him, Emma reaching him first and throwing her arms around his waist while Abigail, more reserved but no less emotional, gripped his hand tightly. "You're bleeding," Abigail said, her voice tight with concern as she noticed a graze on his temple where a bullet or splinter had caught him. Archer touched the wound, wincing slightly. "It's nothing," he assured her, "just a scratch." "It could have been so much worse," Emma said, her voice trembling, "when I heard the shots." "I'm fine," Archer said firmly, "and more importantly, so are both of you." The sheriff approached them, shotgun now resting casually over his shoulder. "That was some fine shooting, mister," he said appreciatively. "You a lawman?" Archer shook his head. "Just a cowhand." "Well, cowhand, you just helped capture one of the most wanted men in the territory. The Army's been after Simmons for months." He extended his hand. "Sheriff Hank Wilson." "Obliged for your help." Archer shook the offered hand. "Archer Novak, and I was just protecting these ladies." Sheriff Wilson nodded, looking at the sisters with interest. "You folks passing through, on our way to Denver," Abigail confirmed. "We were delayed by circumstances." "Well, you're welcome to stay in Silver Creek as long as you need," the sheriff said generously. "Any friend of justice is a friend of mine." After the sheriff left, Archer escorted the sisters back to the hotel. The day's excitement had left all of them drained, and they agreed to rest before meeting for dinner later. As Archer turned to go to his own room, Abigail caught his arm. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Again, it seems I'm always thanking you for saving us." Archer shook his head. "No need for thanks. I told you I'd look after you, and I meant it." "Why?" she asked, her blue eyes searching his face. "Why are you so determined to protect us?" Archer hesitated, unsure how to answer. The truth was, he wasn't entirely sure himself. What had started as a simple act of kindness toward stranded travelers had become something more, a commitment, a purpose, a connection he hadn't expected but now couldn't imagine being without. "Because you matter," he finally said simply. "To me." Abigail's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment Archer feared he'd said too much. But then she smiled, a slow, radiant smile that transformed her face and sent his heart racing. "You matter to me too, Archer Novak," she replied softly. "More than I would have thought possible in such a short time." They stood there, caught in a moment of perfect understanding, until Emma discreetly cleared her throat from the doorway of their room. Abigail reluctantly stepped back, her fingers trailing along his arm as she moved away. "Until dinner," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Archer nodded, suddenly unable to trust his own voice, and watched as she disappeared into the room with her sister. Only when the door closed behind them did he release the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Something had changed between them, something fundamental and irrevocable. And for the first time in years, Archer found himself thinking not just of the present moment, but of the future, a future that, impossibly, seemed to include Abigail Garrison. The news of Simmons' capture spread quickly through Silver Creek, and by evening, the hotel restaurant was buzzing with excitement. Archer and the Garrison sisters found themselves the center of attention, with townspeople stopping by their table to express gratitude or simply get a look at the man who had faced down the notorious outlaw. "You're quite the hero," Abigail teased as yet another well-wisher departed their table. Archer shifted uncomfortably. "Hardly, I just did what anyone would do." "Not anyone," Emma countered. "Most men would have ridden away when they saw us by the roadside. Most would have abandoned us when Simmons appeared. You stayed, you protected us. That makes you a hero in my book." Before Archer could respond, the hotel owner approached their table. "Mr. Novak," he said formally, "on behalf of the Silver Creek Business Association, I'd like to offer you and the ladies complimentary accommodations for the duration of your stay." "It's the least we can do after what happened today." Archer started to protest, but Abigail laid a hand on his arm. "That's very generous," she said to the hotel owner. "Thank you." After the man left, Archer raised an eyebrow at Abigail. "I could have paid for the rooms." "I know," she said with a small smile, "but why should you when they're so eager to show their appreciation? Besides, it gives us a little more time to decide what comes next." Archer frowned slightly. "Next." I thought the plan was to take the stagecoach to Denver once the cavalry returns and takes custody of Simmons. That was the plan, Abigail agreed, but plans can change. She hesitated, then continued more softly, unless you're eager to return to the double R. Archer studied her face, trying to read the meaning behind her words. What did you have in mind? It was Emma who answered, her eyes bright with excitement. We've been talking to some of the townspeople. Silver Creek is growing rapidly because of the silver mine, but they're desperately short of teachers. When they heard that our father was a teacher and that Abigail assisted him, they practically begged us to consider staying. Staying, Archer repeated, surprised. But what about your aunt in Denver? Aunt Martha would understand, Abigail said. She invited us because we had nowhere else to go after father died, but if we can make a life for ourselves here. She trailed off, looking at him intently. Silver Creek needs more than just teachers, Archer. It's a growing town. There's opportunity here for anyone willing to work hard and put down roots. The implication hung in the air between them. Archer found himself at a crossroads he hadn't anticipated. The double R was familiar, comfortable in its way, but it wasn't home. It was just another stop on a journey that had no destination. Silver Creek, with its bustling main street and growing population, represented something different, a chance to be part of building something lasting. And there was Abigail herself, with her quiet strength and challenging questions, making him consider possibilities he'd long since dismissed. I'm not much of a townsman, he said slowly. Spent most of my life under open skies working cattle. There are ranches in the valley, Emma pointed out eagerly. Or you could try your hand at something new. The livery stable owner mentioned he's looking for a partner. Archer looked from Emma's hopeful face to Abigail's more reserved but equally expectant expression. You two seem to have it all figured out, he observed, not without humor. Not everything, Abigail said softly. Some things can't be planned, they have to be discovered. The way she looked at him as she said it made Archer's breath catch. There was an openness in her expression, a vulnerability that mirrored his own unspoken feelings. Whatever was growing between them couldn't be rushed or forced, but it couldn't be ignored either. I'll think about it, he promised. That's all I can say for now. Abigail nodded, seemingly satisfied with that answer. That's all I ask. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Lieutenant Taylor and his patrol returned to take custody of Simmons and his men, expressing their gratitude to Archer for his assistance in capturing the outlaws. The stolen Army payroll was recovered from Simmons' saddlebags, and Taylor informed them that the territory governor was offering a reward for information leading to the capture. That reward rightfully belongs to you, Mr. Novak, Taylor said. $500. Not a fortune, but a decent stake for a man looking to make a fresh start. Archer was stunned by the news. $500 was more money than he'd ever possessed at one time. It was enough to buy a small piece of land, perhaps, or invest in a business. It represented choices he'd never thought he'd have. The sisters were delighted for him. It's a sign, Emma insisted. Providence providing for your future. Archer wasn't sure about that, but he couldn't deny the opportunity the money represented. Still, he hesitated to commit to staying in Silver Creek. The town was welcoming, the possibilities intriguing, but years of drifting had made him cautious about putting down roots. It was Abigail who finally forced the issue, approaching him one evening as he sat alone on the hotel porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. You're leaving, aren't you? She asked without preamble, taking the chair beside him. Archer glanced at her, surprised by the directness of the question. I haven't decided. Yes, you have, she said quietly. I can see it in your eyes. You're already miles away, riding toward the next horizon. He sighed, unable to deny the truth in her words. It's what I know, Abigail. Moving on, not getting too attached to any one place or. He hesitated, or person. She finished for him, her voice steady despite the hurt visible in her eyes. It's not that simple, he tried to explain. I've been on my own for so long, I'm not sure I know how to be anything else. You don't have to be on your own, Abigail said, turning to face him fully. Not anymore. These past days they've shown me what kind of man you are, Archer. Brave, kind, honorable. The kind of man a woman could build a life with. The directness of her words stunned him. In the West, courtship was typically a more circumspect affair, at least at the beginning. But Abigail had never been one for pretense, he realized. It was one of the things he admired most about her. Abigail, he began, not sure what he was going to say, but knowing he owed her honesty. You deserve better than a saddled tramp with nothing but a horse and a gun to his name. I disagree, she said firmly. And you're more than that now anyway. You have the reward money, you have skills that would be valuable to any community, and you have people who care about you, Emma and me. She reached out, covering his hand with her own. I'm not asking for promises, Archer. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that what you've been looking for all these years might be right here. Her touch, warm and sure, anchored him in the present moment. Archer looked into her eyes and saw not just attraction or infatuation, but a depth of feeling that matched the confusion in his own heart. Abigail Garrison, with her golden hair and steadfast spirit, had somehow become important to him in a way no one had been since his mother died. I'm afraid, he admitted, the words difficult to speak aloud. Afraid of staying, afraid of failing, afraid of losing what matters like I lost my parents. That's the risk of living, Abigail said softly, but isn't it worth it for the chance to truly belong somewhere, with someone? The question hung between them as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains. Archer didn't have an answer, not yet, but for the first time in years he was willing to consider one. Give me until morning, he finally said. I need to think. Abigail nodded, rising from her chair. Before she left, she bent down and with a courage that took his breath away, pressed her lips gently to his. It was a brief kiss, sweet and full of promise, but it sent a jolt through Archer that was more powerful than any he'd ever experienced. Until morning, she whispered, and then she was gone, leaving Archer alone with thoughts more tumultuous than ever. He spent much of the night walking the quiet streets of Silver Creek, weighing his options. He could take his reward money and move on, perhaps buy some land farther west or find work on another ranch. It was the safer choice, the one that protected him from the pain of potential loss, or he could stay. Accept the livery stable owner's offer of partnership. Build something in this growing town. See where his feelings for Abigail might lead. As dawn broke over the eastern horizon, Archer found himself at the edge of town, looking out over the valley. Silver Creek spread below him, smoke beginning to rise from chimneys as the town awakened. It wasn't the open range he was accustomed to, but it had its own kind of beauty, the beauty of human endeavor, of community, of possibility. And somewhere in that collection of buildings was Abigail, waiting for his decision. With sudden clarity, Archer knew what he wanted. The restlessness that had driven him for years had quieted in Abigail's presence. The need to keep moving, to stay one step ahead of his own grief and loneliness, had been replaced by something else, a desire to build rather than escape, to connect rather than withdraw. He turned back toward town, his steps purposeful. At the hotel, he found Abigail already awake, sitting in the small parlor with a cup of coffee. She looked up as he entered, her expression cautiously hopeful. I'm staying, he said simply, crossing to sit beside her, if you'll have me. The smile that illuminated her face was worth every moment of doubt, every fear he'd wrestled with through the night. I was hoping you'd say that, she admitted, setting down her cup to take his hands in hers. I can't promise it will be easy, Archer warned her. I've never tried to build a life in one place before. I'm bound to make mistakes. So am I, Abigail replied, but we'll learn together. She hesitated, then added, Emma has decided to go to Denver after all. Aunt Martha's health is failing and she needs someone to care for her. I was torn about what to do, but now, Archer prompted when she trailed off. Now I feel I should stay here, she finished. With you, if that's what you want. Archer reached up to touch her face, marveling at the softness of her skin beneath his calloused fingers. It's what I want, he confirmed, more than I can say. Their second kiss was deeper than the first, a sealing of the decision they'd made. When they finally broke apart, Abigail's eyes were shining with unshed tears of happiness. You know, she said, a teasing note entering her voice, when you found us by the roadside and said we'd never walk alone again, I don't think this is what you had in mind. Archer laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. No, he agreed, but I'm glad it's how things turned out. In the weeks that followed, Archer and Abigail settled into life in Silver Creek. Archer invested his reward money in becoming a partner at the livery stable, discovering that he had a knack for business that surprised even himself. Abigail took up a position as the town's schoolteacher, quickly earning the respect and affection of her pupils and their parents. Emma departed for Denver as planned, promising to visit when she could. The sisters exchanged letters weekly, with Emma reporting that Aunt Martha was improving under her care and expressing her delight at Archer and Abigail's blossoming relationship. That relationship grew stronger each day, as they learned more about each other and navigated the challenges of building new lives. There were disagreements, of course, and moments of doubt, but these were outweighed by the joy they found in each other's company and the satisfaction of contributing to their adopted community. 3 months after they arrived in Silver Creek, on a crisp autumn evening with the aspens turning gold on the surrounding hillsides, Archer asked Abigail to marry him. They were walking by the creek that gave the town its name, the water reflecting the sunset in ripples of orange and pink. "I don't have much to offer except myself and whatever we can build together," he told her, holding out a simple gold ring he'd purchased from the town jeweler. "But if that's enough, I'd be honored to call you my wife." Abigail's answer was immediate and joyful. "It's more than enough," she assured him, slipping the ring onto her finger. "It's everything I could want." They were married a month later in the small church that had been recently built on the edge of town. Emma returned from Denver for the occasion, bringing their aunt with her, a spry elderly woman who had recovered sufficiently to make the journey and who pronounced Archer exactly the sort of steady man my niece needs. The entire town turned out for the celebration, which lasted well into the night. As Archer and Abigail danced under the stars, he marveled at the twist of fate that had led him to that lonely stretch of road where 2 sisters cried by a broken wagon. "What are you thinking?" Abigail asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "That I'm the luckiest man in the West," he replied honestly, "and that sometimes the thing you've been searching for finds you instead of the other way around." She smiled up at him, her eyes reflecting the light of the lanterns strung around the town square. "And to think it all started because you couldn't ride past 2 women in distress. Best decision I ever made," Archer said, drawing her closer, "except for asking you to marry me." As the years passed, Silver Creek grew from a mining town into a proper small city. The silver eventually played out, but by then, other industries had taken root: ranching, farming, manufacturing. Archer's livery stable expanded into a larger operation that included a blacksmith shop and carriage works, while Abigail's one-room schoolhouse grew into a proper school building with multiple teachers. They had children of their own, 2 boys, and a girl who grew up knowing the value of community and the importance of helping others in need. Emma visited regularly, eventually moving back to Silver Creek when Aunt Martha passed away and opening a small bookshop that became a center of culture for the growing town. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Archer took Abigail back to the spot where he had proposed. The creek still flowed, though the town around it had changed dramatically. As they sat on a bench overlooking the water, hands intertwined, Abigail asked the question that had been on her mind. "Do you ever regret it, staying in one place all these years?" Archer considered the question seriously, as he always did when Abigail asked something important. "Not for a moment," he finally said. "Everything I've ever wanted was right here, you, our children, our life together. Even though you gave up the open range. The freedom to go wherever the wind took you," he smiled, bringing her hand to his lips. "That wasn't freedom, Abigail, it was running. You helped me find the courage to stop running and start living." He looked out over the town they had helped build, the community they had become part of. "Besides, some journeys are meant to end, and some promises are meant to be kept." "What promise is that?" she asked, though the smile in her eyes suggested she already knew the answer. "That you'd never walk alone again," Archer replied, echoing the words he'd spoken on that dusty trail so many years ago. "And neither would I." As the sun set over Silver Creek, painting the world in the same golden hues that had illuminated their first days together, Archer and Abigail Novak sat in contented silence, surrounded by the life they had built from a chance encounter and a promise made and kept through all the seasons of their shared journey. The cowboy who once couldn't imagine staying in one place had found his home not in a location, but in the heart of the woman beside him. And though the trails of the West had changed with time, becoming roads and then streets, the spirit that had led him to stop for two sisters crying by the roadside remained unchanged, a testament to the enduring power of compassion, courage, and love in the face of life's uncertainties. It was, Archer reflected as he looked at his wife's still beautiful face, the greatest adventure of all.